Hi everyone. I live in San Francisco. I am delighted to be able to get together with a bunch of really wonderful people from the Python community around the US, but from inside of San Francisco, which is like my home now. It's the place that I know and love. I was born in Fremont, California, so I'm a Californian through and through. And today I want to quickly sort of open up PyBay with a little discussion of breaking the rules. And to set the stage for this conversation, we need to talk a little bit about who I am. Because I have spent an inordinate amount of my adult life caring about the Python community. I was a director for the Python Software Foundation for several years. Back when I was in Boston, I was a co-organizer for the Boston Python user group. During that time, it became the largest Python user group in the world. So it was a pretty big initiative for us to be maintaining. For the past several years, I've been the diversity chair for PyCon North America, and we've seen some really tremendous diversity gains over the past couple of years. So I've spent a lot of my time sort of caring about and trying to steward the best I can my little piece of the Python community. Python is also the only language I've ever used in a job, so it's really important to me that Python continue to exist as a language because it's the only thing I know how to do. So like my first startup out of school, it was this really interesting project around rebootless kernel updates on Linux, but the client software was written in Python. Startup number two had a real-time group collaboration service that was built off of actually this really scary combination of Django and Twisted and Tornado and like every async framework you could think of, just glommed together. It was really beautiful. And then at Dropbox, I'm an engineering director, and Dropbox may be the largest desktop client installation in the world. We have 500 million users. Our desktop client is written in Python. We're actually undergoing this. So Guido works at Dropbox, and we're currently undergoing like a fairly insane effort to port the client to Python.3, which would be a really, like a pretty milestone initiative for Python.3, because this is like just an enormous legacy code base. But the long and short of this is that the only thing that I know is Python. So it's really important to me that this community and this language continue to exist. But I have a secret to share with all of you, which is that all of this work and all of this care and some of the tears and some of the blood, it was never actually about Python. I still love all of you, but it was never actually about Python. This was actually, for me, an exercise in systems. It was always about systems. And here's what I mean by that. So Python is a programming language. It's an open source programming language. It's a language that people learn, and that they learn to solve problems. And that's really interesting to me, and that's really exciting to me, because when you learn how to program, that is a profound experience that changes the way that your brain works. So programming changes the way that you think about and debug and interact with the world. And that's exciting. So when you learn how to program, you learn a set of rules. First, you learn a set of rules. You become fluent in those rules. You become a systematic debugger within the confines of those rules. You work with other people to break down and solve problems, to build software, to build libraries, to eventually, hopefully, even change the language, contribute to the ecosystem to make it better. So when you learn how to program, when you get fluent, you learn the rules, but then you learn that you can change your environment. You can actually change the rules to make the environment better. So really what's happening with programmers, and really this is in any language, but Python's the one that I have the most experience with, programmers have this really profound experience of mastering a system that they know that they can change. And this seems obvious maybe when you say it out loud, but we can actually take for granted why this is true. Like the fact that we're able to do this, we're able to go in and make commits to the C/Python core language definition, able to contribute to Django or to your favorite library. This comes from the tenets of free software. Like they give us explicit permission to change things and redistribute them and make them better. So just to remind ourselves what we're talking about here, the tenets of free software tell us that we have the freedom to run the programs, but also to study how they work and to modify them to make them better, to make them do what you want, to redistribute the copies to your friends and family so they can benefit from it too. This is really powerful. Like the tenets of free software are so baked into and integral to open source communities today that I think we sometimes take for granted what a powerful collective mindset this is. that like changing something to make it better is just a thing that you do when you need to do it. And when we take it for granted, we can sometimes forget to challenge ourselves to carry this very powerful mindset into our lives outside of open source communities. And that's something that I think is really interesting. So programming has rules. Python has rules, but you learn that you can change the rules. You can make the language better. But the truth is that a lot of things have rules. Almost everything is a system with rules that you have the power to change, whether anyone tells you to or not. Pretty much anything worth fighting for, actually, is a system. There are software systems, certainly. There are hardware systems. This is actually me and my sister. I have a teenage sister, and we made a set of like programmable LED shoes that we ran around on the street on last Christmas. So there are hardware systems, but like the truth is that the hardest systems, the most important systems, are usually people systems. And this is what gets me excited. So this is why I care about the Python community. This is why, in particular, why I teach people to program. This is why I invest so much of my time and my life into communities like this, and in particular into enabling other people to learn how to program inside and outside the Python community. Because programming changes the way that you think about and debug and interact with the world, and because you have this experience as a programmer of mastering a system that you know that you can change. Because if you've done that once, if you have that experience once, maybe, hopefully, you are willing to do it again. And we need as many people as possible on the planet who believe this about themselves and their ability to affect change in the world. So the reality is that very rarely do we have sort of the luxury or the comfort of the explicit permission that free software gives us, and that we sort of inherit through free software to the Python community. Nobody's ever going to invite us to change the hardest systems, the ones that are most important, the ones that impact our lives the most. Nobody's ever going to tell us what the rules are. Nobody's going to tell us how to participate. Nobody's going to remind us that we have the power to debug broken systems and deconstruct them and change them and make them better. But it's important that we above all, we who have had this experience with open source software, it's very important that we don't forget that we have that power, that we have the confidence to use it, that we don't forget to share that power, and that we don't waste it. Now, in this point in the conversation, a lot of people have the following reaction. Just, can you give me an example of what you're talking about? You say systems other than these software systems that I'm very familiar with. It's like, OK, sure. I'm a software engineer, and there are these big, complicated, broken systems that I care about. Probably most people in this room, I care about poverty. I care about democracy. I care about climate change. But I'm just a software engineer. These systems aren't changed by people like me, by people with my skills, with my background. These are problems that are solved by politicians in governments, or they're solved by people who have dedicated their lives to scientific research or to community organizing. How do I fit into this narrative? OK, let's answer that question. So first, we're not just software engineers, and we're not just open source developers. The Python community was built from the ground up over decades by tens of thousands of people. People like Grace, people like all of the speakers in this room, people who are attending this event and building a community together. The Python community was built from the ground up into this amazing thing where tens of thousands of people are working together to build the software and build the community around the software, making it inclusive, making it accessible. Don't forget that. And with the work that this took and the fact that everyone in this room, even just by virtue of being here, is a part of this community. So first off, we're not just software engineers. We are part of a tremendous community that has had a tremendous impact in many ways, big and small, direct and indirect. But OK, given that, let's talk about an example. I'll give you an example. That's me. I do own an American flag catsuit, which I have worn on several occasions. This is a picture of me with my poll worker handbook. I ran a polling station in Chinatown during the primary earlier this year. So let's take a look at a timely example, something that I care about personally very deeply, which is sort of democracy as an institution in the United States. There's some pretty freaky stuff going on right now. But we're just software engineers, right? Like, how could we possibly contribute to making this better? And yes, okay, not everyone in this room is going to be a Supreme Court justice, probably. But many of us could, if we were serious about it, many of us could apply our software skills directly to the challenge of making democracy work by joining institutions like the US Digital Service, or 18F, or the technology teams in local government. Or, and truly, I say this seriously, many people in this room could utilize their community building skills, their expertise that you've demonstrated here and in your local Python community, driving democracy forward by serving in some sort of public office. Like, that's not crazy. Someone's got to do it. You could do it. Most people in this room could participate in get out the vote campaigns or be poll workers who run the election stations, ensuring that everyone is able to vote and have their vote count on election day. Most people in this room have the privilege to put their time and their bodies in front of issues by protesting and amplifying the voices of people whose voices aren't being heard. And certainly, I hope that everybody in this room who is eligible to vote, wherever you may live, that you do actually vote. So yeah, it's a big, complicated, freaky system. But these systems are built of many, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people playing tiny parts or sometimes larger parts together. We are all a part of that system, whether we like it or not. We're a part of a community, and we have the power to change it in large and in small ways if we choose to spend our time on it. So free software makes it explicit. It's implicit in cases like this, but these are the cases that really, really matter at the end of the day, right? So that's one example. And as you go through this conference this weekend, I hope that you learn a bunch. I hope that you meet a bunch of interesting people and you meet old friends. And I hope that with the rest of this great community, you talk about a system that's important to you and how you are currently active in it or how you are going to be an active participant in it and change it if it needs changing. So don't forget that you have the power. Have the confidence to use it. Don't forget to share it. And don't waste it. And that's my pitch to you as you enter PyBay this weekend. Thank you. Can I answer any questions?
How did you go about changing the diversity at PyCon speakers?
Yeah. OK, so PyCon North America, this is one of the things that I'm most proud of in my life, and I really like talking about it. And part of why I like talking about it is because there's zero magic to it. OK, so 5 or 6 years ago, 1% of speakers at PyCon were women. Sucks. OK, we want to change that percentage. What do you do? Well, the first thing we did is we created this position, this diversity outreach person who had some sense of responsibility for driving up that percentage, and that person happened to be me. But then it's actually really similar to what I do at work, which is really satisfying. This is like a funnel analysis problem. Like you have a top of the funnel, you need to get people into the top of the funnel, and they convert at the bottom of the funnel to being speakers at your conference. Step 0. You need to have a conference that diverse folks actually want to attend. Okay, don't forget about that part, right? So you want PyCon needs to be a conference that has content that is interesting to a diverse audience. It needs to be a space where people feel comfortable and safe. Things like a code of conduct help with that. People need to be able to get there. So things like a financial aid program. All of these things work together to create a conference that diverse folks actually want to be a part of. So step 0. Step 1 is you need to have an equitable, reasonable evaluation process for speakers. And we put a bunch of work into this over the years, and the process for submitting talks has changed over time. We actually made the first half of the process blind to the applicant last year. And a really exciting result was that our diversity stats were resilient to this change. But you need to prove to yourself that you have an evaluation process that is fair across demographics. And I think we've done a pretty good job of that over the past couple of years. And then, only then are you ready to really worry about the top of the funnel. Like, how do you get more, because if you have an equitable evaluation process, it's not about like accepting all the women speakers. It's not that. It's you want lots of people to submit great talks, and then your equitable process will carry out towards having a diverse speakership at the end. So how do you get lots of people to submit talks? Well, I can tell you what my email inbox looks like for about 3 months prepping for PyCon every year. And it's just hundreds and hundreds of emails that I have sent personally to women and other folks in the Python community who I am encouraging directly one-on-one to submit talks. And I am doing this, and then 10 other people are doing it too. And it becomes sort of a numbers game. I mean, that's reductionist because a ton of work has gone into the setup for this, right? It's like PyLadies exists and is helping people have the confidence to submit talks and reviews talk submissions. And we have this really great conference that people want to go to that has childcare and it has financial aid and all these really wonderful things. But then all it is a ton of work. Like email 500 women who are great, and some of them will submit a talk, and enough of them will that will affect your statistics. And that is it. And I have never seen a shortcut to this process ever work. The only thing that works is like step 0, have a conference that diverse people actually want to attend, and then email a shit ton of people, and it works. But when other conferences sort of express, like I'm not sure how to make this happen, the answer is usually you just have to put in the work. And if you do it, it works. But that's really exciting because that's, again, there's no magic. It's a process that any conference can emulate. So I hope more and more conferences do, through the proof that it's effective. Yeah. Thank you for your question. It is a cheating question because we've worked on this together for a long time, and you deserve a lot of credit for it too.
Well, you also get the credit for me being in the Python.
Oh, I appreciate that. All right, this is a wonderful love fest. But any other questions?
I just want to start by saying thank you for a really great, inspiring keynote speech. I really love the idea of leveraging our experiences and skills as software engineers towards becoming involved in the democratic process. So I was wondering if you could speak to who you reached out to or how you went about actually running your own polling location, and more importantly, where does one go about buying a full-body American flag
So glad
suit?
you asked both of these questions. Well, OK, I'm going to let Grace, I'm going to email everybody who's attending with this information, just FYI. It's really easy to become a poll worker to run a polling station. You go to, if you live in San Francisco, this is the same for every city. If you live in San Francisco, it's like a website where you go sign up. They're desperate for competent people to help out, particularly with the upcoming election, because it's going to be bananas. So you fill out a form on the internet, and they're like, thank you, and then you show up, and you get some training, and then you help make democracy happen. And I have to say, my husband and I both did this. So we both ran separate polling stations, and we're like texting each other all day during the primary, comparing our experiences. This was one of the most profound, just directly experiencing what it feels like to make sure that someone is able to vote. People come in, they don't speak English, or maybe they can't read, or whatever their situation is. Your job is to ensure that they get the information that they need and that they actually vote and that their vote counts. There is something that is deeply, powerfully moving to me about that experience. I'm really glad I did it, and I'm probably going to do it for the rest of my life. Anyway, I'll send an email to the PyBay attendees about how to sign up to be a poll worker if you live in San Francisco or wherever you live. And then American flag catsuit, I was Googling on, hey, internet, google.com, American flag catsuit, enter. And then many Etsy listings pop up. And I picked the one that looked like it had the highest quality material. And it has been an excellent investment. I will say it's a fairly inappropriate outfit. That's about the only picture that I can show publicly. But definitely a great investment. Other questions?
Your topic is really awesome. I remember PyCon a few years ago, and I remember seeing a lot of change in diversity, a lot more women. And I remember just seeing such a change that's now lasted for quite a while and feeling great about it. And I think it was at a PyCon 2 years ago when was it Jacob Kaplan-Moss was speaking? I can't remember. But I remember we were all patting ourselves on the back at the time, going, look at the diversity around us, which was awesome. And then someone stood up and asking a question, and for some reason that stuck with me the entire time, and I just want to share that same feeling now. They're like, yeah, but look around, and how many people of color are here?
Yes.
And it kind of still touches me. I've been trying, and I've been thinking about that a lot. How to make a difference, how to help with that. And there's something that I have, because I keep asking this question, I've just heard about something called the Hidden Genius Project, which is in Oakland, which actually is teaching kids to code, younger kids to code, which I would encourage everyone. It's called the Hidden Genius Project, if you can help out. They're a great organization. I'm only just learning about them, but I got to visit them once, and it's great. But also, I would just love to find a way to make that better. And it's really a comment more than a question. My apologies.
No, let me react to it anyway, because I have so much that I want to say about this. So I really feel like with 2016 we proved to ourselves that we had a very resilient process in a way that allows us to be more expansive about our diversity definition for 2017 and beyond. And I'm excited to work with the PyCon organizers to figure out the right way to do this. There are a bunch of interesting pieces to this. So again, part of the reason why Outreach to Women works is because we have this really robust set of like local and online communities supporting that population that we get to tap into for PyCon. PyLadies, online events and local chapters. There are a bunch of like girls in tech groups that we partner with. So we need to develop some of that infrastructure with other minority populations. And that'll be really interesting. I'm really excited to do that for 2017. The next thing that's really interesting is you can't really make progress on this stuff unless you're willing and able to measure it. And measuring this stuff gets a little harder. Like gender is already hard, and we probably don't do it perfectly, but it gets really subtle really quickly how to surface, like how to ask for this information in a way that's thoughtful and in a way that doesn't have like negative effects on encouraging people to submit talks. So I think we're going to have a really interesting set of exercises that I think there aren't that many conferences who have gotten to the point where they can start experimenting with some of this stuff. I'm excited to figure out what feels like a really good, respectful way to do this for the Python community and hopefully publish the methodology so that other groups can remix it as well. But this is actually a really explicit focus for 2017 and 2018, and I'm really excited about it. Any other questions?
Hi, Jessica. I'm pretty new to the Python community in San Francisco. I want to know that how do you fall in love with Python, and what is your next most favorite language?
Oh, my next most, okay, yeah. So I fell in love with Python. Okay. So I was not one of those wonderkind programmers who like started programming at birth. I'm not one of those people. I started learning how to program when I was in university. My first major was actually chemistry. I have a chemistry degree. But I had a bunch of friends who were pursuing computer science while I was getting my chemistry degree, and I sort of watched them out of the corner of my eye. And I could see that they were learning this really useful toolkit full of tools for solving broad problems in the world. And that was really attractive to me, so I took a couple of CS classes and immediately got hooked, and I ended up getting a CS degree and a CS master's, and like the rest is history. But the first language that I used was actually Lisp. And I was, yeah, Common Lisp, yeah, Scheme. This is at MIT, right at this inflection point when they were switching from Lisp to Python. So I took the first half of my sort of MIT undergraduate education in Lisp and the second half in Python. And it's like you learn, so it's like I learned Python for some classes, but you're able to do useful work so quickly in Python. I still I think in an unmatched way, at least in a university context. And that was just really exciting to me. So I fell in love with Python in school because you were able to do so many useful things with it. And I ended up using it at my first internship and then for the rest of my adult life. So that's how I got started. I also have a really sweet, I'm going to just ramble for a while. Glyph is in the room, so I'll embarrass him for a second. So the first ever open source contribution that I ever made was also in Python. And it was to this library called Twisted. Anybody know what Twisted is? Raise your hand. Yeah, oh yeah. So Twisted is this async networking library in Python. And so it's my first ever open source contribution. And there's some documentation that I thought was a little unclear. That's a little funny. There's some documentation that was a little unclear in a little piece of the Twisted library. I'm like, okay, this is my chance. I'm going to finally make my first, it's like a tiny documentation patch. I'm going to make my first ever open source contribution. And I'm super nervous, right? I'm like, I read the contribution guidelines 3 times over. And I produce this tiny little diff. And I like meticulously fill out the bug tracker report for this. And like I read it over to make sure I'm not missing any information. And it's like way too much information for this tiny documentation patch. And I hover my mouse over the submit button for a while. And I'm like really nervous that someone's going to yell at me that I did something wrong. And I click submit. And like I wait a couple of minutes. And I get this really nice response from this guy named Glyph, who is the creator of Twisted. And you know, he basically holds my hand through this first patch submission process. And he's super nice, and the community is super encouraging. And I'm like, this open source thing seems really great. I'm definitely going to keep doing this. So I had this really positive first open source contribution experience. And I think it was a good investment because I stuck around for a while, and I ended up becoming a core maintainer for the project. Then I wrote a book about Twisted for O'Reilly. And Glyph and I live in SF together now, although we never see each other, and that's really exciting. Yeah, it's like lifelong friends that come out of this experience. But that was really important to me because I want everyone to have that positive an experience. And I think in the Python community, that's reasonably likely. There's still work to do, but we've built this community that is incredibly inspiring to me, where people like me can get a start that's so positive, and I want everyone to have that experience. Okay. Aside about how I got into Python and contributing to Python. My second favorite language is, did you say English? I mean, I think the second language that I've used the most is probably JavaScript, just like for stuff for the websites that we've built. And you know, I appreciate what I use. So there you go. I appreciate it. Any other questions?
Yeah.
I'm clearly an open book, so feel free to really, get into it.
So I love the overall message of these are people that are experienced with systems, use that knowledge on human systems. What are some of the instincts you think that you can acquire in working on computing systems that are less helpful or even harmful when translated to human systems?
Yeah, so often the rules are a lot more ambiguous often. And when I say rules, it's like, what are the rules of moving democracy forward? Or like, what are the rules of fixing poverty? They're going to be very difficult to enumerate in the way that the rules for a programming language are very explicit. So this sort of willingness to tolerate the ambiguity of these systems is like a skill that needs to be developed. Also, people are often not as predictable as software, and you have to factor that into the way that you approach problem solving. I mean, none of what I'm saying is revolutionary. But, people are hard, people are complicated, they're messy, sometimes they're irrational, and you have to figure out the right way to achieve positive outcomes given that those things are true in a way that is different from software. The other thing I would say is it's like pick the part of the system pick the amount of work that you want to put into it. I joked earlier about the democracy thing. It's like if it feels like my vote doesn't count, and maybe if I were president of the United States, I would actually have an impact on this thing, but everything else is pointless. That's the wrong attitude. It's like many little contributions from many people are really what make the difference at the end of the day. And we see that in open source communities, though, right? It's like all of us working together on this, infinity patches to all of our favorite libraries. That is what drives it forward. It's not being a big public figure or having, being the person who's front and center doesn't really. Most of the work is done by many, many people working on small things together. So that is true in open source communities, and I'd say it's also true in these systems. So not answering your question, but it's worth highlighting. Go vote.
Any more questions?
Why don't we transition to the lightning talks next?
Perfect. Thank you all so much. Have a great weekend. Learn something fantastic. Thank you.